we are picking Western Conference reserves. First pick of the second round here, 30 seconds on the clock. Putting me under the pump here, Nick, like we just covered, 100 different options I can go here. But I'm going to go for a player that I think is probably going to be on your list. So I'm going to take him off the board because I think he's the sort of player that's a quality shooter, a quality teammate. He's a veteran, so he's not a young rookie or anything like that. He's got the experience and he's hungry to win. And I think he will fit my team really well with those attributes. And he's young enough to also join this franchise to still, put in a handful of quality seasons coming. Well, I guess he was a reserve off the bench in this sort of role. And I guess if any of my players go down, he's definitely a player that can step into the starting lineup too. So I guess with my first pick of the second round in the West, I'm going with CJ McCollum.
I feel like this is reminiscent of the first round where you pick someone and then I was very happy to get the top of my draft board. CJ McCollum, good offensive firepower, obviously played with Dame Lillard and can take a differential role. So there's some proof there. But I mean, our starting fives respectively have the firepower. You don't need that. You need versatility. You need 3 and D. So I'm really happy to be able to take with the second pick, Mikal Bridges, defensive player runner-up.
So I'm happy I've got a quality player coming off the bench on the wings now. So I'm going to go a big man here. It's funny actually, in the West, I think we were saying this last week, there's not that much depth as far as on my list in a big man category here. So I guess, I think there's a sort of lot of fringe potential all-star players that really haven't made the leap necessarily yet. And obviously some players that are, quality players, but probably, obviously in mid 30s now that, might not necessarily fit the whole franchise, startup sort of model that you're sort of looking for. So I guess I'm going for a young fella. You said Mikal Bridges is a 3 and D player, yeah? So I'm going a guy that's probably slated to be as quality as a 3 and D player. He is, and a big man as well. I think he definitely got a bit of defensive of the year configuration. And I think he's only played a couple seasons now, had a bit of injuries, but he's bounced back fairly healthy. So I'm happy to take a bit more size here and go with Jaren Jackson Jr., my second reserve pick.
So I'm kind of keeping the theme. I'm not going to buy into the bait of bigs just yet because my bigs are still on the board. Jaren Jackson also wasn't on my list. Too much foul trouble, maybe not proven just yet. I'm going with the switching. I'm going with the mentality that most of my players in the portal is going to be 6'5" or above and can shoot threes and space the floor, but also play defense. So I am going to draft Lou Dort from OKC.
We said how much fun this was last week, and this reserve is living up for its enjoyment levels here too, because there's a lot of options here to go as we covered, and I'm gonna say that it's you've definitely taken a different approach to me, and that's okay. And which just works out well because I guess my players on my list here are probably the sort of players that that I'm looking for, obviously, to get this franchise off the ground and going. So look, I'm gonna go for a player here who's basically a franchise cornerstone at his organization at the moment. He's still extremely young, and to take him and stash him on the bench here and give him minutes somehow off the bench is probably offensive to him and his abilities, but he qualifies for me to be able to pick him here. So I'm going to take it here with my third reserve pick in the West, SGA. So he's going to boost on my bench here.
So I think excluding Mikal Bridges, we have not had the same player on the draft board. So I considered SGA. But I feel, I looked at the starting five. Look at your starting five: Devin Booker, Zion Wilson, Ja Morant, Steph Curry, all very potent offensively with the ball. So I felt like the role players on the bench mix and match, right? So you'd never play that starting five completely. You'd have two or three of them, and fluctuate them in and out. So I'm curious about your picks. You've picked some big names. So you're allowing me to stick with my theme, and you're not taking any of the players that I was worried you might have taken. So with the third pick of this round for me, which I think is like the sixth now, I'm going to go with Desmond Bain.
All right. Desmond Bain's a good pick. Like it. I'm going to go with my fourth pick here in the West. Bit of a unicorn in the West. You know what? Hasn't even played an NBA game yet, but I'm so high on him. I would take him on my franchise and let him develop his game and his frame and all his defensive sort of potential to go along with his length and his shooting ability already at his age. And I think this player here would make any team, any of the 30 teams in the league, better by joining their organization. So with my fourth pick in the West here, I'm going for a rookie, Chet Holmgren from OKC as well.
Well, it only took you until your fourth pick of this round to finally take something off my board. Yeah, really valid. When you're talking about, some of the players, well, your team's quite young, excluding Steph Curry, from your starting five. So he ages with them well, and it's an insurance policy in case it doesn't pan out, because you never know what's going to happen, especially with rookies. But yeah, very, very jealous of that pick. But I'm going to go in the opposite direction now. So there's a lot of youth on my team. We need a backup center, and I'm actually going with someone who maybe in their youth had a lot of potential and then has aged quite well, has been a key component to a lot of successful Western Conference teams, has really reinvented himself and has demonstrated the ability to play with a couple of our players. So well, the fourth pick of this round for myself, I'm going with JaVale McGee.
We'll try again. Take two here. All right. I've been notified by the, by the committee that I couldn't go with that pick, which was disappointing. So that's okay. I'm gonna pivot a slightly different way here, and I'm gonna go with another player here that obviously doesn't have as much experience as I would like there, but is definitely still a championship winning sort of player, and definitely shows that he can fit a role. Okay, he's actually high on my list here, and I actually went a different way there, which is funny because I realized that Draymond wasn't on my list because of that exact reason. so I'm going to go here with my last pick here in the West here, player that's obviously, won himself his first ring here, can come off the bench, can obviously fill a starting spot too, and is happy to really, shown he's really happy to fit an organization that is successful and play his role. And that's really critical in this sort of team that has this sort of depth. Okay, so I'm going with my 10th pick here, Andrew Wiggins.
Nice pick. Obviously kind of, demonstrated the ability in the right franchise to, really hone out that role, and, in a sense, does what I would want out of Mikal Bridges, but, an improved capacity where he's big offensive contributor, but defensively is able to shut down the other team's best player or two. You've left me with so many options here. So I'm looking at my lineup a little bit, and I've only got two centers, and there's a temptation to take a center, but then there is an era of small ball. And, I've got a lot of versatile players that could make that work. So instead, I think I'm going to steer towards youth, and I'm going to steer towards someone with a lot of potential for, defensive player of the year. And I guess it's a prelude to one of my picks in the next round as well. With the last pick of this round, I'm going with Davion Mitchell from Sacramento. What the hell are we doing this for?
You reckon someone's going to vote for your team?
Look,
let me break down your team, Nick. Firstly, you've got LeBron. So unless you get all your LeBron lovers to join in and give you a vote, then you would probably a million votes there already. Okay, but from a franchise starting perspective here, okay, I didn't necessarily like your first five. Okay, you've obviously got AD, that's obviously injury prone. You've got LeBron, that's obviously old and getting injury prone. You've got Luka, who's probably going to end up on this franchise being the number one man, being surrounded by lots of role players because that's sort of how he plays. And then today you've gone with an interesting array of players that are all complementary pieces. But maybe what you didn't really consider was that you had an opportunity here to take greater talented players and considered whether they could fit into this franchise. And what you'll find here is that if they couldn't, in a hypothetical world, obviously, in this scenario, you'd be able to flip them for something else. And I think that's the part where last week I made a pick where I simply took what I guess I believed was probably one of the most talented players that was left on the board at that point. And it wasn't necessarily a great fit, in my opinion, but I was like, it's probably worth taking a fly on him in that sort of sense. Even with your last pick here, Davion Mitchell, I like the kid. He had a good end of the season last year. Sort of really stepped up when was it De'Aaron Fox was sort of he was out for about 20 games or so at the end of the season, I think, and he stepped in and he was able to really put up some reasonable numbers. Sacramento weren't winning anything anyway, but there's probably many more proven players in the West. I guess now we can share a few names here on my list, and maybe you got a few on your list. I guess even like De'Aaron Fox, the fact that he's a player that was ahead of him, in the rotation at Sacramento at this point, unless he is traded. We got players here like still to consider like Josh Giddey. We got players here like Jordan Poole. We got even players I reckon like Jalen Green, or more veterans like Jamal Murray and Norman Powell. These are all players that are still on the board here, which are on my board. And I'll be curious to hear who's on your board still that maybe you didn't obviously end up, picking. But I think, there's 10 picks here that we had to go with, and I'm pretty happy with my 10, because I think I've picked 10 players here that if they don't necessarily fit, okay, within this unit straight away, okay, I think they can be interchanged with other parts down the track. And that's, I think, a really important factor here when you're building a franchise and how you're obviously acquiring your talent.
I guess we're going to get really technical now, because depending on how realistic we're playing these franchises, we've got 5 max players minimum, and you've got a couple, such as CJ McCollum.
I'm paying the money. I'm paying the money. That's all
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
I'm paying the money.
you're
I'm
in the
getting a
luxury tax,
championship right now because I got 2 MVPs on my team.
I think that's the thing. Like, I look at my team and I look at your team, and both obviously, in the modern NBA would be favorites because of just how stacked they are. But I think the difference between the two teams, or at least why I'd advocate for mine, is excluding LeBron James and JaVale McGee, all of my players are under 30, right? And then there's a lot of early 20s with the athleticism to run and the versatility and the hustle and effort to make defense work. But then also, I've drafted, especially the 5 today, people who will play their role, because I think what you've got is I would take out Jaren Jackson and probably Chet Holmgren, even though he's yet to play a game, as 8 players on your team that would all want the ball, need the ball, and are quite used to having the ball. And I think your team, chemistry-wise, would have a lot of readjustment, whereas mine, its starting 5 definitely needs some readjustment, unless you chose to stagger the lineups a little bit. But they would slot right in. Mikal Bridges, has been paid very generously and has the capacity to score 30 points, but often doesn't, and understands his role on his team. Lou Dortz is exactly the same. It's a 3-and-D player. Desmond Bane's kind of supporting Ja Morant, but I think would be, a good defensive specialist and a 3-point shooter. Davion Mitchell, again, defensive minded. JaVale McGee just really plays the role quite well. Now you're talking about flipping. Well, anytime you flip something mid-season, you mess up chemistry. You never really get exact return. If you traded someone like Andrew Wiggins, you would get maybe 2 players that are equivalent value, if not slightly under. So you'd fill out your roster with a variety of talent, but I don't necessarily know if you get the exact fit. So
I would flip.
I kind of joke.
I feel I would flip Wiggins and get Lou Dort and Davion Mitchell for Wiggins in a potential scenario where a team was a 3-way trade.
I don't think the NBA operates like that. I don't think, when you're looking at players, all right, getting Andrew Wiggins would be great for a franchise, but to do what? So unless he's kind of in a situation with the D'Angelo Russell trade where he puts us over, he's not going to, we know that he's not going to come to a team and elevate them. So if he went to Sacramento, for example, for Davion Mitchell, Sacramento's not expecting to make the playoffs because of his presence, right? So they're not going to overtrade youth and potential draft capital in future drafts for someone of Andrew Wiggins. So I'd be surprised if you got the return that you wanted. You've also got, I think, a variety in priorities, right? So, for example, Chet Holmgren really is yet to find his feet. Jaren Jackson is yet to find his feet. Shea's starting to find his feet. Those three players may have depreciated value because they're not getting the touches that they need or the stats that they need to generate. I think the draft strategy, I could win a title in the next 2 years, and then LeBron James fades out. Anthony Davis might need to be traded, but I can still keep that as a sustained young core. I want to validate my team without putting down your team, but I feel like our draft strategies are drastically different. And I think if we were the two title contenders, my team should beat yours quite confidently. And
Whoa,
moving
whoa,
forward,
whoa! That's a big
forward,
claim. Whoa.
yeah, I think if we put this on 2K and simmed it out,
that feels like the next step almost. But let me just rephrase that Andrew Wiggins trade scenario. Okay, if I wanted to right now, if the Warriors went to Sacramento and said, "I'll give you Wiggins for Davion Mitchell," I think Sacramento would win that deal. That's pretty much a no-brainer. Okay. From a quality perspective. Okay, from a quality player perspective. I'm not saying that Wiggins fits the Sacramento outfit or he's going to elevate them to a championship or anything like that. He's not. Okay. But that's the point. But if you went the other way around, if you went from Sacramento and called the Warriors and said, "Hey, I've got Davion Mitchell, I'm making him available here. Will you give me Wiggins?" No way. No way. That's not even entertained. It's not an offer right now. And Mitchell might be a player one day that has increased his value significantly with much better play for the next couple of seasons. Okay, but right now they're not at that level. And I think that's the point I'm making there. And you're saying that your team obviously would be able to win a championship over mine. I've got Jokic and Curry. Okay, and Zion obviously banking that he's healthy, just like you're banking AD's healthy, just like you're banking LeBron's healthy. Okay, but I'm going to ask you, your team, who's your best shooter? Like you're in the 2022 here. Okay, who's your best shooter on your team? You don't have any
well,
shooters.
I mean, I'm looking at your lineup, and if you took out Steph Curry, I don't see you having
Booker,
generational talents at that.
Booker can
Booker,
shoot.
we have discussed the fact that Booker is not a great 3-point shooter, especially when it matters. We have
Especially,
discussed it.
but look, I think that's the point that I'm gonna, I don't know how we're gonna duke this one out now. Now we've made picks. It feels like 2K is the next logical step. How else do you do it? But I'm going to make the counter argument here that I think your team lacks shooting, and I think shooting is critical for LeBron to succeed. I think shooting is critical for Luka to play his most effective style of game. Okay, and I think that with your reserves, you probably could have loaded up with a little bit more shooting, which you didn't go for. You went for that 3-and-D sort of player, but you probably didn't need as many as you picked.
I respectfully disagree, but that's okay. We'll let people decide, I think.